Hey there and welcome back to NBA 2K17. My name is Pete and today we complete the first year of 2K17's MyGM or MyLeague mode with the Charlotte Hornets. First, let's take a look at the situation and let's start with the core. Charlotte gives you a great backcourt with Kemba Walker, Nicolas Batum and Kidd-Gilchrist. Those are also your three best players, all with a great age to succeed for a few years and with contracts that lock them down long term. With Marvin Williams and Cody Zeller as starters, your frontcourt is alright but improvable. Zeller is only 24 and will surely become an 80+ overall player. Williams, however, is 30 years old, not the best inside player but really your only option here. Now you could consider moving Zeller to the power forward and giving either Hibbert, Kaminsky or Haas the starting center spot. This would result in two 7-footers in the paint, which can be both an advantage and an incredible problem. But apart from that little question mark at the starting power forward spot, your starting five is pretty much set, so let's talk about the bench. Jeremy Lamb is the first guy off the bench at shooting guard and a solid backup player with a nice upside at only 24 years old. Especially the center position is pretty deep with the three aforementioned players. Hibbert, Kaminsky and Haas are very similarly rated, but provide three unique playstyles. At the point guard we have two players battling for the backup spot in Ramon Sessions and Brian Roberts. Both of them are 30 years old and both of them are on expiring contracts. Sessions, however, has a team option. Other than Marco Bellinelli, who can play the shooting guard or small forward, we have Aaron Harrison and Christian Wood, who should not be considered solid backup options at this point. So to start the season, your rotation might look something like this: Walker, Batum, MKG, Williams and Zeller as the starters, then either Sessions or Roberts as the backup point guard, plus Lamb and Bellinelli to complete the backcourt, and Kaminsky and Hibbert below the basket with the option to stretch the floor by switching Hibbert for Haas. I already mentioned a few expiring contracts, but let's get into detail for a quick moment here. Both of our backup point guards are in expiring deals, however Sessions can be extended for one more year with a team option. The biggest problem then comes at center, where both your first and likely second option are expiring, with no option to extend Hibbert before he enters free agency. Cody Zeller is a restricted free agent though, so you can always re-sign him. And Spencer Hawes is also technically expiring as he has a player option coming up, so his fate is not in your hands. In short, at least on paper, you risk to lose almost your entire center rotation. For the sake of completion, Aaron Harrison also expires, but we will not worry too much about this. He will likely not play a significant role with the team and he's also just a restricted free agent. In terms of trade assets, we have a lot of solid players in the mid-70s that we could use in trades, which provides us with flexibility. However, I am firmly convinced that if you make a trade with the Hornets, it's not going to be a blockbuster. A look at the draft picks provides us with a pretty standard picture. Charlotte has all first and second rounders for the next 4 years. They are a young team and could add one or two more nice pieces in the drafts of 2017 and 18. After that I would worry about winning, because then your star players should be in their prime. Which means if you want to, your 2019 and 2020 first rounders could be added to trades. Cap space is a point that we should mention, but that will likely not play a significant role. In the current season, Charlotte is slightly in the red with about 5 million above the cap. After that, a few contracts come off the books and the salary cap will rise, which leaves you with roughly 20 million to play. However, knowing that I have a tendency to trade expiring contracts for long-term options, that might quickly go a lot lower. We should also not forget that one of the key pieces of the team in Cody Zeller needs a new contract after the season. In short, don't get too excited for high-profile free agents, you will likely not have enough left to lure them over. With the situation in Charlotte now firmly explained, let's have a look at the 3 key questions for year 1. Your first question concerns the backup point guard. You basically have 3 options here, and that is either to start Ramon Sessions, to start Brian Roberts, or to acquire somebody else. That question will factor in directly to one of the moves we will make. The second question is, do you trade Marvin Williams? Williams is 30 years old and has a pretty big contract. Now 30 isn't too old, but the chances that he sees minutes at the small forward are slim with a stacked backcourt, so he will mostly be limited to the power forward position that both Zeller and Kaminsky can also occasionally slide into. And the third and probably most pressing issue, how do you prevent the huge hole at the center spot with most of your backup guys potentially leaving in free agency? And we will deal with that last question in the first move. However, before we do so, for the purpose of realism in this video, I should quickly mention that I consider Walker, Batum, MKG, Lamb, Kaminsky and Zeller untradeable. And now let's begin with the first move. We will trade Spencer Hawes and Roy Hibbert. For what, you ask? Well, we have three options here, and that is either a backup center, a backup power forward, or ideally a starting power forward, the latter one being a bit unrealistic though. Before we get into trade targets, let's first talk about the why behind this trade. Now first off, Hawes is very injury prone, his entire body is basically yellow. As I've mentioned before, his contract is also expiring and he has a player option, so he might be gone, you don't really know that. This leaves you with two scenarios that you will likely want to avoid. The first one, you want him to stay and he leaves without you getting anything in return. And the second one, you want him to leave because you want to clear cap space, but then he stays anyway. In short, trade him, it's less risky. Hibbert is in this trade for the very simple reason that his contract is also expiring. I'm convinced that you can get a better asset for the two of them that can come off the bench next to Kaminsky. That leaves you with a small decision before you make the trade, and that is should Kaminsky play the center or the power forward off the bench, and potentially in the starting lineup as well in a few years. With both Zeller and Kaminsky both still on the roster in 3 or 4 years, you might want to consider putting Kaminsky on the power forward spot permanently, which means that a backup center is a prime target now. If you manage to find someone and pull something off, you might also go for a starting caliber power forward that would move Williams in the second unit next to Kaminsky. Now, a starting caliber power forward was a bit much to ask. I did find two very interesting options for backup centers though. The first one includes Ellenson and Baines from Detroit. Now, Baines might be a point of discussion, as you will only pick him up for 1 year, maybe 2 if he decides to take his player option. The more interesting piece is Ellenson though. He is only 19 years old and already has solid potential. That means simply invest the untapped potential training camp 2 or 3 years in a row, and you suddenly might find yourself with someone who's much better than you expected. The other trade option, which provides you with slightly less risk, is this one, which would give you Kosta Koufos and Willie Cauley-Stein from Sacramento. Koufos will be on your team for 2 years, maybe 3 if he takes his player option, and in that time you can heavily invest in Cauley-Stein and groom him to take over the role of Koufos. Use untapped potential twice and you suddenly find Cauley-Stein with a potential of 85, and that might just make him a star very quickly. I went ahead with this second trade. It would also allow Sacramento to start Rudy Gay as a stretch 4 power forward, while Willie Cauley-Stein is inevitably stuck behind DeMarcus Cousins at the center spot. If you decided in the beginning that you want to trade Marvin Williams, then you can of course add him to this trade, and maybe even leave out one of Hawes or Hibbert and go straight for a starting caliber power forward. Those are hard to come by however, and Marvin Williams' trade value is not exactly sky high, so you might fare better by holding on to him for the moment. In move number 2, we will now create another trade package, this time including Sessions and Roberts. Both of them are on expiring deals, and even if you pick up Sessions' team option, he will enter free agency the year after that, so you don't really win much. Both of them are also 30 years old, which is not too old, but compared to the rest of the roster, they are clearly at the top. And the third reason is that both of them are only okay-ish as backups, and with their ratings likely not increasing much more, there is room for improvement. That means your target should be a single backup point guard with a rating of 75 or above. He does not necessarily need to be a great shooter, as he will likely play next to Bellinelli and Lamb, who have some range. And by applying only that filter, you will get a lot of options, but be careful what you pick and what fits the team. I would advise against picking up anybody who will turn 30 soon, and I would also stay away from anybody who's starting already. Keep in mind that this player will likely never move past Kemba Walker in the rotation, and that might make him unhappy if he comes in as a starter. Ideally, you want a player that can develop alongside your core. Best case scenario, you extend your core to 2 or 3 bench players next to the starters. If possible, try to pick up another point guard in this trade, even if it's a bad one, just to be on the safe side and have a third option available if things get rough. Alternatively, trade Sessions for a better option straight up if the only viable options give you another point guard who's also expiring, like Ray McCallum from Detroit for example. A potential trade would be this one for the aforementioned Ray McCallum combined with Ish Smith. However, in this scenario, McCallum doesn't really add anything, and you can simply trade Sessions for Smith straight up. Another option would be Matthew Dellavedova, but that's $9 million a year for a backup point guard, although a very good one. Or 2 years of Corey Joseph, who might take his player option and stay for a third one. Or a bit more of a prospect in TJ McConnell. I went with Sessions for McConnell straight up, but again there are lots of options available. Go for what you think fits the team best. Now instead of 1, I give you 2 more moves, but those are both hypothetical. Move number 3 would be to re-sign Cody Zeller if he wants to. He will very likely not want to re-sign with you and test free agency, however that is not that big of an issue as he is a restricted free agent and he will more than likely take the qualifying offer. You should likely not settle for that, but I will get into that in just a minute. Bottom line, if he's willing to re-sign, lock him down long term. Move number 4, if you did not include him in the previous trade and your injury situation is looking good, and also a tiny bit depending on how you stand in the season, you might want to flip Brian Roberts' expiring contract for a second rounder now. Options include Houston, Orlando or Utah, all of them give you an expiring contract in return. Also, if you don't plan on extending a qualifying offer to Aaron Harrison, then you can do the same for him, otherwise he will be gone and you don't get anything in return. Now, in most of my simulated seasons, we did not make the playoffs, either because of injuries or because of teams like Philadelphia suddenly getting to 40 wins. If the same happens for you, then you will probably pick inside of the lottery and should maybe target a small forward or shooting guard or power forward who can spend time there. Going forward, this will ideally be the guy to back up Michael Kidd-Gilchrist now that Bellinelli is in his contract year and turning 32. In terms of team options, I accepted all of them, that's Kaminsky and Wood, as well as the newly acquired Willie Cauley-Stein and TJ McConnell. I also gave the no-brainer qualifying offer to Zeller, and then entered free agency with just slightly over $1.5 million in cap space. However, we are only looking to lock down Zeller long-term and then some filler contracts here and there, so that's not much of an issue. For Zeller, however, you can go above the cap to re-sign him, and I think it's a good idea to stay out of trouble in the future if you one-up the qualifying offer with a nice long-term offer sheet for 4 or 5 years. And that concludes year 1 and therefore this video. Let me know in the comments below how you would handle the Hornets in MyLeague or MyGM. Feel free to leave any questions in regards to other moves you might want to make. And if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button or even subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!